Good evening, everyone. I think we're ready to go, so I might just make a few introductory remarks, if that's okay with people. Yep. My name's Dr Joe McGirr. I'm the independent member for the seat of Wagga Wagga. And it gives me great pleasure this evening to welcome you to the New South Wales Parliament for the film screening of Streets of Colour. Can I begin just by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we're here today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and for me, back in Wagga Wagga, it's the Wiradjuri people. Acknowledge them and elders past, present and emerging. And also, right at the start, I'd like to acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues. There are none here just yet, but of course Parliament, as you're probably aware, is still debating. I think they're up to the City of Sydney Bill, having just finished the Paintball Amendment Bill. So you can see that we are hitting the big issues in Parliament. Just a few words by introduction. This has been a collective endeavour, and I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to the Joint Justice Initiative and the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies for their support. It's been instrumental in bringing this event to life. And I also want to thank them and the Hindu Council of Australia, who have been working with me on a bill that I want to introduce to the Parliament to ban Nazi symbols and salutes, but in particular the salute, which we don't think is covered by current legislation. So thank you for their support. A special mention of thanks is owed to Calliope Diamantis. Thank you, Calliope. From the Joint Justice Initiative, who's organised and coordinated all aspects of tonight's proceedings. So thank you so much, Calliope. And I want to express my gratitude to the creative minds behind this important film, whom I have had the pleasure of meeting for the first time. And I just want to, at the start, apologise for being so dorky about meeting you. But it's a bloke like me doesn't get to be in the presence of producers, directors and film stars, so I'm sorry if I came across a bit, gawky. My daughter's a cinematographer and she would be much more comfortable, a training cinematographer. But I want to include in that gratitude director and writer Ronnie S. Riskalla, thank you Ronnie, and producer Yolandi Franken and the distributor Dov Kornitz. Thank you. And I'm grateful for your generous permission to showcase this newly released film, Australian film, here at State Parliament. Thank you very much. And I want to acknowledge your commitment to raising awareness of the terrible impacts of racism and in fact violent far-right extremism on both families and communities. And I understand this film paints a vivid portrait against a backdrop of Sydney's western suburb of Mount Druitt, and it's been brought to life by the talented multicultural cast, and among them our lead actor, Ramel Rahman, who stands as a proud recipient, I understand, of the prestigious Heath Ledger Award. So thank you, Ramel. The film does, with its powerful narrative, I understand, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm hoping it will confront us with some profound questions, particularly about racism in Australian society. We often think racism is a thing of the past. We often comfort ourselves by reading novels that give us a great feel that we're virtuous and moral about it. But the reality is that in our society, racism continues to linger as a poison. And if there was anything needed for us to recognise that, it would have to be the debate we just had we're having now over the referendum. And look, I understand there's lots of different sides to the referendum debate, but I have been saddened, I'd have to say, because some of the passion, vitriol, can I just say, on one side of the debate, no side, does, I think, reflect some unfortunate, real racism in our society. I guess it's good that we're confronting it, but I think for tonight's perspective, for me, it's participating in it, and as a Yes campaigner, can I say I've come across it. I don't want to influence people's views on this, but it has been a reminder to me that the backlash that I've had, that in our society this is an issue. I mean, we debate things, and I think sometimes we think racism in Australia is a thing of the past, but I know that you know it's not, and this is a reminder of that. So anyway, enough of the soapbox, enough of the preaching. I urge you to linger afterwards. I think we're going to have a thought-provoking Q&A session to delve into the themes and the dialogue of the movie. And so I hope you can stay for that. I certainly hope that I don't get called away to Parliament for that as well. I understand After today's screening, this will be soon available on a digital on-demand platform. I understand for the first Wednesday in October. Is that right? Yep. So look out for it. And once again, can I finally extend my sincere gratitude to all of you today for your participation, because I think that signifies a shared joint commitment to a just, more inclusive and loving society, and hopefully together we can aspire to make a change to bring that about. So without any more ado, I think, Kelly, is that correct? Without any more ado, I can now get off. Yes. Stop listening to me and we'll get on with the show. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Oh my gosh, I'm not sure about everyone else, but we were like laughing and crying, and I almost bit through my pen at one point. Thank you everyone for staying. We're in for a treat now with the Q&A. My name is Natalie Samia, and I'm Director at the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies. And we are honoured to co-host this screening and also this Q&A discussion. It brings me immense pleasure to join you today for the themes that are raised in both the film and also the discussion today hold immense importance to the Jewish community and many other communities. And I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge Dr Joe McGirr, the independent member for Wagga Wagga, for his leadership and also the Joint Justice Initiative we're delighted to be co-hosting. It's my privilege to introduce our highly accomplished moderator, Dr Yona Gilead, the Malka Einhorn Modern Hebrew Director at the University of Sydney. Dr Gilead's expertise and insights will undoubtedly enrich this discussion. Our panel comprises the creative forces behind Streets of Colour, starting with the brilliant writer and director Ronnie S. Riskalla. Also with us are the talented cast members who brought this incredible story to life. Rahel Rahman, whose portrayal of Terence Tez Hadid defied the odds and touched all of our hearts tonight. Nanif David, who portrayed Andrew amongst others, and the incomparable Jennifer who portrayed the accepting and resilient Mount Druitt mum, Karen Madden. Let us just take a moment to thank all of these remarkable individuals, and there's others in the audience as well, for their contributions. Your artistry and dedication have truly made a difference to every single one of us that are in the room tonight, and to every single person that sees this wonderful film. So thank you very, very much.
So, good evening everyone, and thank you for attending this very important event. I would like to set up the framework for this Q&A by putting it in the context of the Crime Amendment, Nazi Symbols and Salute Bill of 2023, which is an amendment of the Crime Act 1900. The aim of the panelists' penalties are trading in goods depicting Nazi symbols and Nazi salutes. And as a way of legislating against, and again I'm citing the draft bill, intention of performing hatred, discrimination, intimidation or violence. So in this Q&A we will be focusing on the story line of the film's first part, which again centers on those two main themes of crime and also of education, which I will touch on a little bit later. So I would like to begin by addressing those intertwined themes of social abuse, especially and disadvantage, that are so damaging to individuals and groups in our society, especially those whose families have migrated to Australia and who, at not fault of their own, have often been disadvantaged by the education system and the social environment they grew up in. So these individuals and groups are part of our multicultural Australia, and we see this clearly in the opening scene of the movie as Tez and Akachi drive through Mount Druitt. And I think that Mount Druitt really represents many other Western Sydney suburbs. So I'm actually going to address a few questions to each of our panelists. And Ronnie, if I may start with you. As we've been told, you are the screenwriter and director. And I understand that you are of an Egyptian heritage. And the film is loosely based on your life experience. So my first question to you is, can you please tell us a little bit about your life as a young adult growing up in Australia?
Sure. So my parents migrated to Australia from Egypt around 1970. They faced a lot of racism themselves in their first years. I actually grew up in Marrickville before I actually moved to Mount Druitt. My parents divorced when I was around 7. I'll take you back a little bit back. I grew up in Marrickville, which was a very multicultural area. It was Greeks, Italians, Lebanese, Egyptians. So no racism there for my first part of my life. It was when my parents divorced and we were forced to move to Housing Commission in Mount Druitt is when this story sort of starts. I can remember as being a kid being pushed off my bike, being called all sorts of stuff for the colour of my skin. They would hear me talking to my mum in Arabic and they would make fun of that. I remember them, sitting on the bus behind me, spitting in when I had hair. I had thick afro-style curly hair, and they would spit in my hair and it would just fall down the front of my forehead. It was that visceral and that intense. It went on to, being in my teenage years, there was a lot of gang warfare in the 90s, loosely based on racism. It wasn't just violence and drugs and all that sort of stuff. It was at the heart, it was always racism. Our school was always on the news, it was on current affairs and Today Tonight for, sort of lots of different gangs, different coloured gangs too. It wasn't just black and white racism, excuse me. It was all sorts of different nationalities fighting each other. So I faced a lot of racism in my teenage years, but it wasn't until about 2016, when I was actually in my 30s, I put all the racism behind me, and then it happened again. It happened from a 13-year-old kid who was abusing me racially in the worst sort of ways, and I just thought, we have progressed in society, racism was getting a lot better, but then when this happened, I just thought, it just drudged up all the racism that I copped as a kid. And I just thought, I've got to put pen to paper, and this is when Streets of Colour was born. 2016, took 7 years to finish.
Thank you, Ronnie. So you're really leading me to my next question. And can you talk to us a little bit about the process of writing and then directing the movie?
The writing was easy because, like I said, it's loosely based on my experiences, so it was never hard to sort of draw from those characters, much like Gaz, who would always say these sort of things to me and my friends. It took about 3 years to write because I was working full-time, but it came very natural. Like, it was really, I had too much to write, and I took a lot out. I was going to show those scenes where I was on the bus and, being pushed off my pushed off my bike and I'm bleeding and all this sorts of stuff, but I just thought I wanted to just focus on some other issues as well as an adult instead of the kids stuff, yeah.
Thank you. What do you hope viewers will take from this movie?
I'm hoping that, racism can be eradicated, really. I mean, racism is better, but I think there's still systemic racism. Like the famous line that Tez says in the film, I hate the way they look at me, and that still happens to me till this day, where people look at you in a certain way. It's not blown out racism anymore, because there's so many forms of racism. There's the racism that you see that's fully blown out, that, you bloody this and that, but then there's racism that's like, you see the grandmother, she says something that's casual racism, that happens as well. But the biggest racism I think we're facing today is the systemic racism. It's like, you might go to a job interview and you might not get that job because of the way you look, or they see your name on a resume and they can identify that you're from a ethnic background. So I'm hoping that everyone can, and people who come to this country can embrace who they are and that we can somehow, you know, keep talking about this.
Thank you. Rahel, I'm in Kurdistan, and your parents fled the country and lived, that's what I read, as nomadic asylum seekers for years until they came into Australia. Of course, we all seen that you play the role of Tez brilliantly. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, can you please tell us how does your life experience compares with that of Tez?
Well, I guess in my formative years, you know, growing up in what was Saddam Hussein's genocide of the Kurdish people, yeah, we escaped that. I mean, I was quite young. I have picturesque memories, but nothing quite vivid or detailed. But spent a year in Turkey because they had the United Nations there and did our interview. And they gave us an option between Canada and Australia, and I think my father knew Canada was cold, so he was like, the other option. So yeah, I grew up I was like an odd kid who I liked to mimic people and I liked to do different accents, and I found people fascinating and interesting, and I grew up kind of when racism was happening, I was kind of, I wasn't as aware of it when it was thrust at me. I guess the pinnacle moment would have been like the Cronulla riots or something, when I felt it most, you know, I felt that very strongly. Because on the road you get sworn at by cars driving past, and what it did to me, I guess psychologically, was I disassociated from, like, I became two things in one. I became like the outer core of what I was psychologically. I was like, okay, well, my external core is one of like a Middle Eastern person that's judged harshly, but I guess it sowed a seed of self-loathing, you know, because you have no one to turn to, you have no one to talk to, so you just start to dislike yourself because of the judgments you face. But what got me through it was the art of acting and being able to identify that the soul that was driving the vehicle was a separate thing, that my soul needed to stay intact and stay strong, because this is the body I was given, this is the culture I was given, and I have to, it's like getting a hand in poker or something. You've got to deal with whatever hand you get dealt and make the best of it. But yeah, I started acting from a place of self-loathing, escapism, wanting to escape my own reality, like exploring the many different dimensions that could have been. You know, I could have been English, I could have been Irish, I could have been any culture just by happenstance. But that was my coping mechanism for dealing with the intense racism that came to, you know, towards any ethnicity really. I think whether it's racism or just judgment of character, people deal with some sort of onslaught of criticism in any which way, you know. But the one of racism is quite difficult because it's something that's out of your control, you know. So when Ronnie, because I've known Ronnie a long time, we've been friends for many years, and he told me he was interested in making a film and that you know, was critiquing these sort of subject matters, and I was obviously highly interested instantaneously. I was like, well, you know, let's get the script going and let's do this film. So, like, I'm Kurdish, my father was a communist, my mother was agnostic, I have an uncle who's a priest, I have an uncle who's a sheikh, and I come from Kurdish Benjus, so I have Jewish ancestry. So I'm just a proper smorgasbord of cultures and you know, so it helped me open my eyes to the many different experiences of what people can go through, and to be able to do it in a film in an artistic sense. Because sometimes you get given lectures and some people find it hard to focus, but if you can do it through an artistic means, it really helps solidify the message or the moral that you're trying to put out into the, you know, or a domino effect of positivity that you're trying to, you know, cause. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going back to the crime amendment bill, because that's why we're actually here tonight. And as I stated earlier, it will include the banning of neo-fascist salutes and also the grey wolves salute, which victimizes, again, as you said, people of Greek, Armenian, Assyrian, Kurdish heritage, and sometimes also Jewish and Christian. So can you tell us, and I'm asking Tez, but I open it to everybody in this panel, what does this proposed bill means for you?
I guess I have the mic, so I'll start. Look, I think it all stems, in its origination from manners. You know, being aware of that certain things are inappropriate and cause emotional damage or backlash to a signal that may be kind of basic to someone, has a deep inherent emotional reaction to someone else. Nazi salutes and that salute, all the different salutes that signify some kind of hatred, or there's only so much you can do as far as explaining your perspective. Like if you can dissect your perspective, with like specific details, you hope that that's enough. You hope that by explaining to a group of people that may be infested with some kind of hate that's bigoted or learned, or it's a behavior really, right? We're all beings of behavior, right? When all else fails, and you've explained your perspective and you've attempted to sympathize even with your enemy, or enemy, whatever that is, sympathize with someone that shows a dislike towards you or a hatred towards you, I think, and they continue to do so, even though they know that the realities of that kind of signaling, I think the next step is what we're doing here, right? With the banning the salutes, because when you've tried all avenues, then the last avenue, it's like stealing. Like you said, please don't steal. I worked very hard for this. I bought this bread. Please don't steal it. I need to feed my family, and it just keeps getting stolen, then the law has to come and play a part in being the final anchor in stopping a terrible behavior. So I think that's where we're at now. We've attempted to sympathize, we've attempted to explain emotionally, and when all else fails, I think the law has to come in, and hopefully when the law is enacted and someone does a salute and is harshly dealt with correctly through the legal means, then maybe that will spark the final straw in the psychology of, okay, so I've been fined, or I've been, whatever the ramifications may be, there's got to be a reason, and hopefully the law is the final straw that opens the eyes and has that, epiphany for people that are filled with hatred. And I just think, honestly, it's such a silly, immature, simplistic way of, portraying a feeling. If there's something you feel, if you feel hatred, let's talk about it. Let's get nuanced, and let's get deep, and let's go through the layers and understand what's really going on. Because a simple, basic salute that hurts someone else, I think, is just immature and simplistic, and doesn't really go anywhere. Doesn't have any sort of solve for any sort of issue. So, yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Yes, sorry, I want to introduce Nenif, who was also part of the creative group of people who have made this movie, and I don't know whether you noticed, but he's also Andrew in the movie. So yes. So we have, and also I'm calling you Karen, but I know you're not Karen. Yeah, I know, but you're Karen in the movie. And she's she's Carl's and Gaz's mum. So we'll get to you in a minute. But do you want to say anything about the bill?
Yeah, well, to be honest, you know, it's a bill that needs to be introduced as well, so as Rahel stipulated on that as well. A lot of things are happening. You can educate certain people, you can educate them, but sometimes they don't listen. So next thing is making it law. So that way it's enacted on as well. And then look, doesn't actually mean like, okay, yeah, we're going to arrest you, or we're going to fine you as well. But education is very important as well. So you've got to educate the person like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing this a lot? And hopefully, there's a lot of like atrocities happening in the world, genocides and that. So this could be a door opener to other things that are happening around the world. Myself being Assyrian, indigenous of the Middle East, from day one, thousands of years we've been getting persecuted. Until now, there used to be 1.2, 1.5 million people in Iraq. We're displaced all over the world. There's only about 300,000 in Iraq. And worldwide, there's only about probably 1.5 million Assyrians. So we're fighting for a cause as well. But hopefully this law as well will address other issues and, yeah, come to a place to help other people who are suffering as well and who don't have a voice. We're lucky, like I've known Rahel as well. We all went to the same film school as well. And Ronnie had this brilliant idea. And we love films. So you can make, yeah, maybe 10 years ago I could make a stupid film, you know, oh, let's just get drunk or whatever, make a beautiful film and comedy. But as you grow old, you've got to deliver something to the public as well, to people. We have to send a message as well. We're getting old, we're not getting young anymore. So this was a perfect opportunity. As Ronnie said, it deals with a lot of things, racism, people for their religious beliefs as well, you know, they get persecuted. And it's not a black and white, you know, racism. It could be someone saying something to an Indian person or to an Asian person. By saying even to an Asian person who's smart with a calculator, you know, that's pretty much as well a derogatory comment sometimes, but it's light-hearted. So the main thing is we put out a message, and hopefully this film will help as well with the legislation that the board's trying to introduce. But this will lead to other bills coming in and education as well. Thank you.
Ronnie, do you want to add?
I don't know if I can add any more. I made a whole film about it, so I'm just really happy to be here to be able to. I mean, I never dreamed I would make a film that would inspire this much sort of change. I mean, I did want to educate and inspire and all those sorts of things, but I'm just really happy that we're here today and discussing this, and I really hope that the legislation gets passed.
Well done. Thank you. Okay, Jennifer, you played the part of Karen, Madden, Carl's and Gez's mum. Your Karen is a very strong woman who welcomed Carl's friends, Akachi and Taz, who have been friends for 18 years. So please tell us a little bit about your experience of multiculturalism in Australia and whether, and if so, how you brought this into Karen's role. Karen's character, I should say.
Karen's character. Okay, well, my experience of multiculturalism, I grew up in an extremely white suburb, southern suburb of Sydney. You know, we had, I think, the most I knew, everybody was the same. You look at our school pictures and we all look the same year after year after year, and that followed through with high school. So I didn't see the racial discrimination, although I did a little, and I was baffled by it as a young girl. The corner store we had, they were sort of like in competition, a Greek grocery store and an Italian. And the kids, some used, they used to comment, which ones do you like best? You know, which wogs do you like best, the Italians or the Greeks? And I used to think, what? I mean, they were both so equally beautiful. I mean, at that time, it was nothing, you know, that was the kind of, not innocent, I sort of thought it was horrible that they were even making kind of derogatory remarks if they preferred one over the other. But, and then we had, further down the road, there was another grocery store, and that was run by a beautiful Chinese family, and everybody seemed to love them. So, and that continued on, you know, through the decades. So there was no, not that I was aware of, any racial prejudice that I felt quite ignorant. And it wasn't until my girls went to a school out of the area, and there was, and even then, by then we'd hit, later in life, and they didn't experience it was an all-girls school, but they were exposed to different cultures, but all in a positive way. So, but I do know, my understanding, like just discrimination generally, just seeing the pain, I mean, even being bullied, only once, I had a couple of days in primary school being bullied, and for no apparent reason, and to this day that still, I think about it and it affects me. So that's one tiny incident. And then to have 2 out of my 3 daughters also experienced discrimination again, for just random bullying. And again, I just thinking about the character Karen, I just wanted to rescue them straight away from that environment, and it was so hard to understand. And then for me, just as a Christian, I grew up, I went to Sunday school, I was sent to Sunday school, and even my brother at one stage, he really made fun of that, said some, I was so hurt by him having a prejudice about that with me, and I just thought, okay, and so, that, my faith over the years, I sort of went astray kind of thing, and when I was a flight attendant for 13 years, but there was a lot of talk about, sorry, this is just about discrimination generally, but about even being a Christian, they didn't know I had, found my faith again and got back on track kind of thing, and the flight attendants used to bang out, have you heard of those Christians in the air, the CIA? We call them the CIA, but it was CITA, Christians in the air. And they used to joke about it and pull them down, and because some of them would proselytise or just, you're having a bad day, Jesus loves you, whatever they would say in whatever way out of the, love and whatever. And I didn't do that kind of thing, but I was still, when I said that I was a Christian, oh, really? I would not have picked that. Like, well, you're okay, you're an okay Christian, and I still felt, I'm an okay Christian. Like, what is this? What are we even talking about this? And I just couldn't understand it. I still don't understand it, and it still hurts me greatly that there's discrimination for disability, for how you look, for your sexuality, and for the colour of your skin. It just blows me away. Yeah. So Kazza comes on the scene, and I have children to somebody that, had that was hidden from me in my backstory, a hidden racial prejudice. And sorry, I could go on for it. Just give me a mic. Sorry, you continue.
No, it's interesting.
Yes, did you want to ask another question?
I might just move.
Yes, definitely.
I just want to say she's the least Karen. Restored faith in Karen.
You're all welcome to join in if you have, but I wanted to address the next question. And a little bit about more subtle types of racism, and then if maybe I can address it to you. So in one of the scenes, quite in the beginning, Tez gives a lift to this older lady, Mrs. Lewis, and in the car she says, and I'm quoting about Akachi, that he was a good boy, even for a black boy. So I would like to ask both of everyone, but then you are first. Have you encountered such subtle racism?
Well, mine's not. Look, I had one incident that happened to me, and it's stuck with me the rest of my life. Like, we've been blessed, at least the areas we grew up with. It was mixed cultures, the Australians, I was about to say the wogs or whatever, but like everyone. So it was pretty good. We were blessed in that sense. But I remember I remember perfectly well. There was one time we went to Kiama, and back then, Kiama was obviously your white Australians, you know, like what are these wogs doing here or this and that. And we sat at a specific, it was an ice cream place. It was, we would have been probably 16, 17. It was me, my cousin, two of my cousins, and there was a table, so we needed one more chair, and we asked the lady next to us, we go, please can we, you know, have a chair? She didn't look at us. She just acknowledged and said, yeah, take it, without turning around and looking at us. And then as my cousin's gone in her sight and taken the chair, it was like she's seen a ghost, and all of a sudden she said, no, like that. It was like, we were shocked, like, even my cousin, like, she, you know, she went on to be a barrister, but she was even shocked, and she goes, all right, well, yeah, like, we didn't know what to do, so we said, all right, just take it, you know, like, and we were kids, like, we were, like, obviously, you know, it was their area, so we couldn't really do anything, and like I said, we were kids, but yeah, it was shocking as well, so, and that's always stuck with me as well, and yeah, that's, I wouldn't say subtle, but something, yeah, that's happened, so. Thank you.
I was expecting her to ask you if you wanted caramel flavour, not vanilla. Look, I think with subtle racism, like he's a good boy even for a black boy, look, I think certain things, intention is very important. If someone is unintentionally faux pas, I think, you know, it's like watching Mrs. Lewis on screen. She says this kind of line, and had it had that malevolent intention, we would kind of be like, oh, Mrs. Lewis, we don't like Mrs. Lewis anymore. But because we know, we can feel in her delivery that the intention is just ignorant, or there is no intention, she gets away with it, right? And that's, I think, in moments like that, intention is very important. It's very important to inform. Oh, hey, Mrs. Lewis, just so you know, that's maybe that was okay in the 1880s, but that's we don't do that anymore. So I think those things are important. I think if we also have to have strong skin for those instances, and rather than letting it cause us to crumble and fall into a heap and let past traumas reignite, I think it's best to take a breath, understand the intention, and try your best to inform the most cohesive manner so that the person opposite you, and with love and with positivity, so that they don't feel judged and also are conditioned to not repeat the same ignorant kind of statements that may cause someone else, you know, some sort of psychological harm. Yeah.
I don't know what to add. I still I'm married to an Anglo-Saxon Australian woman, so anytime I go anywhere with her, I still sense that someone's looking at me like, what are you doing in a mixed relationship sort of situation? So that's as subtle as it gets, I guess, apart from the incident that made this film come to life. Yeah, just that look, you can feel it, you know, it's piercing. Yeah.
I have to just add a personal thing. Whenever myself or my siblings brought a partner home, my grandmother would say, is he Jewish? Is he Jewish? And you know, we always laughed, but that was also in our background. But I just want to push you a little bit, everyone. And sometimes we see racist behavior, an intimidation towards another person. And I always ask myself, have we done anything? You know, you said maybe gently, but I do think that if we say nothing, people around or people who uttered those racist comments think it's okay, I got away with it. And I personally try very hard, if I see anything wrong, to do something about it. And I know it's difficult, so I just wanted to ask you, you know, if you could, either if you were in such a situation, or maybe you have the courage in the future to stand up to people who do the wrong thing.
I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I've fought back or anything like that, because most of the occurrences were when I was a child or a teenager, so it would have been something immature like F you back or something like that, so I don't remember ever like standing up for myself. I wish I did in a way, but that's why I made this film, I guess. That's sort of cathartic to sort of get it all out. But yeah, I can't recall any situation where I defended myself apart from, you know, hurling back some swear words or something like that. But maybe Rahel has a story for us.
I got a good one now. Once again, I mean, I'm pretty boring with these answers, but I think it's very nuanced. I think you first, if you see something happen, you assess the danger of your own involvement. So how inebriated is this person? Are they, if I engage, are they going to resort to violence? So there's many things you can do. There's one of two things you can do, I guess. You can either reprimand that person instantly and say, hey, what are you doing? That's wrong. Please don't do this. Can you stop? But I think through like conditioned behavior, when we're in society, we can assess the danger aspect. We go, it might not be the smartest thing to tell this 6-foot tattooed person, hey, what are you doing, you know? Especially for me, I'm not the tallest guy. But what you can do is instantly console the person that was involved in the harassment, right? So if Ronnie yells at Nenef, I know he'll beat me up, but if I go and console Nenef and go, are you okay? Then what that will trigger in Ronnie is that he doesn't have support. The support is going to the other party. And it's these little psychological tricks, not that I'm, you know, a psychological genius or anything, but I think it's very nuanced, it's very dependent on each scenario. Idealistically, we would love to point it out and shun it any which way. I think it's like laughter in a cinema. You know, one person laughs and then everyone's like, oh, we can all laugh. So I think if we always had that confidence that if we were to reprimand someone, we had the whole train carriage or the bus or the room behind us all stepping up at the same time, there would be that sense of strength and kind of subconscious confidence in reprimanding. But I think based on the dangers of today and the, you know, vagueness of certain legal structures in regards to getting involved and how much can you be involved and when are you legally obliged, that it's best to find an alternative means. And I think supporting or consoling the harassed, depending on what the level of harassment is, I think. If it's violent or something, absolutely, I think it's imperative that the community get involved and try and diffuse the situation. But when it comes to abuse or racial, you can, I think it's instinct, you know. But yeah, sorry, I could just keep talking about it. But yeah, so that's, yeah.
100% agree with Rahel. It depends on the situation as well. What the person, maybe he's on drugs as well. So, you know, you don't want to put yourself or other people in danger as well. So sometimes it's just managing the situation as well, observing, you know. And sometimes you hope you had friends like John Wick, or maybe, or Equalizer, that could come and sort it out for you. But there's situations like that, again, what Rahel said, you just have to, especially this day and age, like someone will just pull out a gun or a knife and that, you know, where innocent people, and we're seeing it all on the news, like Good Samaritans are just getting killed for helping someone. And unfortunately the law, you know, they'll only get 2 or 3 years, they'll say, oh, they had a bad upbringing and that. Yet the innocent person and his family, he's lost his life and the family have to suffer for the rest of their life. So it's one of those delicate situations, unfortunately. I don't wish it upon anyone, and hopefully the person doesn't encounter it, but we do. But yeah, it's one of those situations.
Jennifer, you've got anything to...
Totally agree with Rahel, and being a bystander of discrimination, I think if we can teach our children, I want my grandchildren, I want to start, you know, just even through seeing this film, as you know, a movie for me, but I want my grandchildren now to be able to be that person that will not just be a passive bystander. I still feel guilt over being a bystander, of seeing an adolescent bullied when I was in high school. Shameless, it was just so awful, to the point where he attempted to hang himself, and he came back to school and those bullies then made fun of him, and I saw them doing it, putting their hands around their neck and to him, and it's still to this day. I didn't know what to do. I was quite shy, and but I just cried. I even cried telling Mum about it today. I was talking about it, and I think what I would have done if I'd known to go to him, because he was isolated, and I felt isolated as well in my powerlessness almost. It was so weird, and I would love to see children educated in how to, not necessarily like Rahel said, to go in and punch out which I would love to. So many times it really, it would incite it in many of us, I'm sure. But to go to the victim, and then you start, like Rahel said, more people will come, and the next thing you know, you've got an army against. It turns on itself.
Thank you. Another thing that to me comes through very strongly is, and again I'm quoting Tez, the idea that the place you grew up in determines who you are, your actions and reactions, and what life puts in front of you. So we see it in the movie, especially with those families, as I said, who migrated to Australia. And would you like to comment on this aspect, that the place you grow up in impacts on your life? And I'm opening it to anyone in the panel who wishes to respond.
I think that's a fallacy, that line. He believes that in the story. Obviously, he thinks that, growing up in a low socio-economic area means that you're just going to end up on the dole or on drugs or dead or whatever, So I specifically put that line in to say, hey, that's not exactly how it is. And you see him come out of it, obviously, in the end, when he goes through his journey and he goes through his redemption story. So, no, I don't believe that environmental factors are an excuse for anyone to say, hey, I came out of Mount Druitt, so I'm going to be on drugs, and I'm going to let what the media say about the area, the demonise the area. It's a large working class area which people don't really know. The media just paints it in an awful sort of picture, an awful light. So I wanted to actually give hope to the ones coming out of those low social communities, that you can make something out of yourself, and that sort of dialogue is not true to life at all.
Oh, look, I think it's just, you either let your external circumstances dictate how you turn out, or you just don't. It's really it's person by person basis. And of course, like, if you're in a certain area that is more prevalent, where there's drugs and crime, then the chances are that you may or may not, may have a higher chance of being involved in it. So it's so nuanced and detailed. It's like Ronnie's partner grew up in Mount Druitt, Renee, and she never saw any of that. It's always fascinating when Ronnie talks about it. Sorry to do that. But I always found that quite fascinating, that you can be two people from the exact same area, but just depending on the rules and how you grow up, and just from one street to the next, it's a different set of values and ethics. So I don't even think it's about a suburb per se. I think it's just about chance, and like, what street did you end up on, and who is your neighbor? I think your neighbor is important, because it's like that thing about if you want to understand someone, you assess their 5 closest friends, and whatever their interests are, whatever they talk about, whatever they do, you can pretty much guarantee that there's something you know, that they have together. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
Yeah, I disagree with that as well. You can be in a low area, but I think, to be honest, it's more your surroundings. Like, for example, who your friends are. For example, with us growing up as well, like my parents would like to know, okay, who are your friends, who are their parents as well, and what are the influences on them as well. And then, even if you're in a, say, not the best school or whatever, but if you know, or your parents or whatever, they know who you're surrounded by, and like whether they're, they come from good families as well. So it's a bit, they're at ease as well. And a lot of people have come from, like, say, these bad areas and that, but they've gone on to become engineers, doctors, so sometimes I think it's an easy way out to say, oh, I come from this area, so, that's why I'm arrested every day and that. But whatever the area does, I think it comes down to parenting as well. And again, as I said, who you surround yourself with, the friends, whether you have faith as well. And all these things matter and help develop the person as well.
And also, if your friend's a drug dealer, just tell him, hey, pharmacy, go to uni for a few years. It's essentially the same thing. No one will judge you.
But I do think that education is a really important element in impacting on our lives, especially if something can be done at school level, regardless of the environment. So I just wanted, we might have some questions from the audience, but just to sort of end up with two questions. What do you think? What do you think the school system can do? If you have any thoughts about, combating racism.
I'm actually talking to a friend of mine who I also grew up with in the area, and I think she's working with the Department of Education, and she wants to get Streets of Colour onto the curriculum for the HSC. She believes it's such an important subject to speak about. So in terms of education, watching a movie like this it's entertaining, so you can, educate by entertaining, I think, is the best way. That's why I made this film. And if it can be in schools, then that's a great tool, and the next generation of high school students that come out will think in a different way.
Education is very important, absolutely. And I've got ideas about, even being at an airport just recently, and, seeing Middle Eastern people, just the looks. How can that get diffused that there's still not people on edge when you're at an airport and then, oh no, I hope they're not getting on my plane. It's almost like that's what you're seeing or feeling, and how can that be I'd like to see that talked about in schools, kind of bring in everyday scenarios, things that have been affected by 9/11 and on, terrorism, etc., and try and get some healthy perspective.
And I think we cannot not speak about social media, that we now know has such an impact on how young people think and behave and what's allowed and what's appropriate. So I know I'm mainly talking to an audience who tends to agree, but do you have anything to say about the place of social media, or how, I don't know, what can be done?
Social media.
As the social media expert. Just quickly on that, I think that's airports and seeing Middle Eastern people. I think it's just basic conditioning. I think education, we've got English, maths, science, let's bring in an element of psychology, because I think learning about psychology is amazing. Like if you learn about conditioning and you learn about behavior and you learn about all those things, it helps you assess situations differently and deconstruct scenarios in your day-to-day differently. So that's what I have to say about that. So, but social media, oh God, I got a lot of problems. I'm of that generation, so I was born in '93. So I lived without social media, and then I lived with social media. And now that I have like an iPhone, I don't know how I ever lived without one, right? But social media is interesting. It's really harmful psychologically to the sense of self, to the sense of hierarchy, dominance hierarchy particularly, where I stand in society. It puts an absolute label on one's self-worth and identity. For instance, how many followers do I have? How many likes do I get? It can really be destructive to one's sense of self. And I don't think there's a way around that yet. I think Jonathan Haidt wrote a great book called The Coddling of the American Mind or something, I believe. And it's about the effects of social media on children and youth. Great details in there. Yeah, social media is interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, it's complex. I still don't know how to even attack it without somehow saying something wrong, so I'm not in the position at this point to have such a concrete ideas about it that I can valiantly and confidently express them. But I think it is damaging, but with anything damaging, there's also positives. So how can something that is destructive to one's psychology, how can that be, morphed and used for good? How can we use social media to make people feel less alone, or make people feel part of something, or make people feel, all of the positive effects of social media. So yeah, it's a really interesting dichotomy at work. So anyway, sorry, that's boring me.
Yeah, just like Rahul said with social media, with everything, there's good and bad. So, like now, like watching the news or hearing if someone's missing, and straight away everyone goes on social media, they'll post, oh, have you seen this person? So that benefits society as well. But then you got the negative stuff as well, which, everyone knows, like, oh, look at his life, they're on holidays every day, and how come, you're working, or you're not working hard enough, she's got a Gucci bag, she's got a Louis Vuitton bag, and it causes troubles as well. So that's damaging as well to society, because people then use that social media to pretty much, like I said, judge their life or how their life isn't happening. And yeah, like anything else, like everything, there's good and bad. It's just the way you portray it or you view it and deal with it. Like if you're seeing a lot of negativity as well, good thing is now you can block people, you can block articles and that. And also a good mechanism to control, like for kids as well, because sometimes you're not there to see what kids are watching, what they're being influenced by, and yeah, and that goes to leads to a bad path. So with good, there's always bad, and with bad, there's always good.
Sorry, I wanted to say, yeah, sorry. The problem with social media is it's spawning a loss of sense of individuality. I feel like and it also gives license to people to perpetuate certain dangerous ideologies, but under a shadow, under a guise, because I can create accounts, multiple accounts, and perpetuate an ideology, much like the salutes, the Nazi salutes, the symbolism, and do it safely in the comfort of my own home with no ramifications, and make people feel, because of the strength of social media and things going viral, the domino effect of it permeating through society and making someone like me feel like I'm being enveloped in a sense of danger when really it's just three nincompoops creating accounts and saying silly crap. But we're losing a sense of individuality and nuance and being able to speak up about our own experiences, and we're being forced into group ideology, which is good, but also bad, right? So, yeah, so I worry about that because I love nuance. I love getting to know someone one-on-one. I love breaking down their experiences, our experiences. You can always find something of a connection between your lover, your friend, and your enemy, which can eradicate these sort of boundaries or barricades between you soulfully connecting. So that is what I fear about most, is that it's mindless groupthink, and which is scary, especially when talking about dangerous ideologies.
I think the big danger with social media is that you don't see the other side, you don't see their reactions, you don't see the hurt, you don't see the terrible things. And I think that, you know, it will be wonderful, Ronnie, if this, in one way or another, the movie does get into the schools to make kids very much aware of, you know, our actions have consequences. So, thank you. Calliope, I don't know if you want to open to questions, or I can...
We've got a little bit of time, so we can maybe get a couple of questions in. If I can grab a mic. So, if anyone wants to ask a question, now's your chance.
I have oh sorry, I was just going to say I had another question that I sort of decided not to ask. And it was with Tina, Taz's first girlfriend, who falls pregnant to him. And she says, I haven't got the quote in front of me, but you can't tell me what to do with my life. And I wanted to ask both men and women in this panel, you know, because I know women now are prominent in our society. And, you know, if you have views about who can say what.
Here we go. No, I think I feel confident with this one.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I think absolutely, ultimately, it's absolutely in the hands of the woman who's bearing the child, who's carrying it for 9 months, who's dealing with all the physical ramifications and psychological ramifications, and ultimately the final decision is in the hands of the party which is bearing the baby. I'll be careful with my words. But I think that if, for instance, in this scenario, if the party who has inseminated the other party, if they can, if they can have an adult conversation, just two souls that really want to understand each other, can really delve deep into what are we going to do for this next year? How are we going to handle this? Are we financially ready? Are we ready with our families? Are we soulfully ready? You know, there is a conversation to be had just out of pure respect, but obviously the final decision is the person who bears, right, the responsibility physically and so on. So I just think it's a matter of being mature and having an open and honest conversation filled with love and no judgment. Yeah, so I think in this day and age, with the many cultures, with the many beliefs, with the diverse thought that exists around us, that is just my opinion. I think having an adult conversation and trying to understand what is best for the future. You know?
Jennifer, have you got something to say?
I would, yeah, 100%. Oh, what am I? Yeah, that's your one. That's very nice. Us personally. The beautiful conversation that you are talking about would be more than welcomed. The deep conversation. Yes, I have been in this position. I agree.
I'll just grab one more.
Was there anyone that wanted to ask a question? We've got a couple more minutes, so I'll give only a couple of people an option to speak if they want to.
I don't need the mics.
Oh, just a camera.
Hi, Ronnie. Just one question. What was your most challenging part of making this film? I know you had to saw back through the whole thing, putting you stand up and walk and you were crying, but yeah.
Not so much. But, funding, getting government funding, which we had none of, caused this film to go on to 7 years in the making. So having to work part-time and have 3 kids at the time as well was very challenging. And as you said, I've got a chronic back injury and sciatica that's 24 hours, so I had to live through that. That's quite difficult to try to make a film whilst you're in pain and whilst you're on heavy medication as well. So the film does suffer to a certain extent. If we had funding, it would have made the process a lot better and a lot more comfortable health-wise.
Was there anybody else?
Mine's really light.
He had his hand up.
Best till last time.
What was it like working with Veronica Cloyd?
I feel like that's a loaded question with her family sitting in the same row. She was absolutely fantastic. Veronica auditioned for me multiple times. There was about 500 girls who auditioned for, not 500, 500 girls who applied for this role and a whole bunch who auditioned, and getting it down to the last 3, she beat people on Neighbours and Home and Away who had been acting for years, who just brought such a great depth to the character and such honesty and emotion. So it was fantastic working with Veronica, and she's going to have a really bright future, I believe.
It's like so light. I like it. It's very heavy. So, as a girl of the 80s in southwestern Sydney, go Canterbury.
Yeah.
Where'd you score the car?
Took me back.
Yeah, well, I owned a Cortina myself back in mid-90s. It was actually quite lucky. One of the actors in the film who actually plays the funeral priest, his cousin had a bunch of cars, Italian family. He owned many cars. You probably saw him in the garage scene. So he was happy to showcase all his lovely cars in the film. He didn't let us drive him at first, if you remember. He wouldn't let us drive it, and so we had to put him in the film. He's actually the big guy in the warehouse. He doesn't say much. So that's so we just made him a character, like one of the thugs in the film, because he wouldn't let us drive. But eventually he let us drive the Cortina. Even
He only let me drive.
Yeah, and then myself. I was the car wrangler for a little while. I had to go pick it up and bring it to set.
It broke down on the last day.
It broke down on the last day, believe it or not, because it's a Cortina. It's old. And what's significant about the Cortina is it's exactly the same model that I own, different colour. I had a green one, and it was made in 1979, and I'm born in 1979, so it was like very fitting. And the other car too, which does the drive-by, the Ford GT, that's also, actually I think that's 1970, but yeah. Anyways, so we're very lucky to have people related to the cast to give us those cars. Yeah, which I love those cars, obviously. And the restaurant, yeah, we got the restaurant because the guy who knew the cousin with the cars owned the restaurant too. Italian restaurant, which no longer exists, sadly.
One more question.
Calliope, there's a gentleman, yes, in the grey suit. You had your hand up.
Dr Gilead, thank you for conducting this on your stage here, and congratulations to Ronnie in particular. I had a moment in the middle of your story that was quite effulgent, as in the parts, particularly where you were trying to represent that effulgence. On the screen behind you, I recognised the building behind Karen. I stood underneath that building at about 1 o'clock one morning, talking to an young Aboriginal woman, while another Aboriginal man, Wiradjuri landscaper, was coming upstairs to talk about things. You talk about 1 o'clock in the morning and come downstairs again. So I had 20 minutes talking the Seven Sisters Dreaming with this Aboriginal woman who came from different parts of Australia with no particular origin, which is not uncommon. I work as a secretary with Aboriginal elders in committee, so looking in the abstract, over your film, and while I may not have seen lots of Aboriginal faces, that can transform if you use the abstract part of your soul, which is the fourth star sister, ascending from the bottom, abstraction. And my fortunate moment was, as I'm currently rereading Edwin Arnold's Bhagavad Gita, the Song Celestial, amongst other versions I've read in the past. For some reason, that totality of circumstances is bringing me out of my normal existential stuff, where I'm pretty much like to be alone, to recalibrating what I've experienced back against all the labels that literature accompanies and takes away the experience while you're learning the labels again. So I saw yourself as the old gentleman in the park, and Tez in his persona, both in his as the actor that is displayed on stage, and as the character, as Arjuna talking to Krishna in the middle and several points along the way. And I thought, as you've now taken the scholastic being invited into the curriculum system, that you might want to reflect on your own story, perhaps, if you've got the time, in the context of the most succinct version of the Bhagavad Gita, without reading the Sanskrit. And you'll find that your universal themes are in there. The battle between both sides of the psyche, represented by the warring parties. On the comment that, as I wrap, that Dr Gilead had made in referring this back to the crime amendments, symbols and so forth, as the Hindu Council, and not recognising being present here today, so I made my comment on the Bhagavad, perhaps in their absence. But that type of prejudice that you come across, whether it's a layer called racism or just prejudice, of the innate beingness in some humans, are born psychopaths. And they cover the full spectrum of society. So it's not unnatural, the Bhagavad Gita would say. And I just wrap with that to say, well done, and if you can enrich it with a book, you should get a doctorate.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We'll take that as I'd just like to ask Michael Kolkossian to come up and say the final sign-off for tonight.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone who stayed until the end of the Q&A. It was great, very insightful comments there. I want to express the Armenian National Committee of Australia, who's a member of the Joint Justice Initiative, our gratitude for everyone's presence here tonight. Also on behalf of Dr Joe McGirr, the State Member for Wagga Wagga, and the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies for your participation in watching the film, but also in this insightful Q&A. Truly impressed by the comments in regards to the film, and particularly around the importance when it comes to stamping out racial discrimination and hatred in our society. The discussions have ignited communities that are encouraged on ensuring change in Australian society and action, and that is by implementing small steps that have huge ramifications on our society that Dr Joe McGirr is trying to implement. The Joint Justice Initiative, and on behalf of the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies, express our gratitude to the creators of the film who have provided us with a thought-provoking vehicle to contemplate and inspire solutions to combat such racial violence. Please join me in thanking the individuals who have contributed to this amazing film and to tonight's discussion. Ronnie, Riskalla, Veronica, and Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us this evening, and thank you everyone once again for participating.
Thank you for coming, Doc.
Thank you, everyone.